Welcome everybody. Today I want to talk about networking. My favorite topic of the past. Basically, I give you a little introduction first. I'm in networking for about 12 years now, or was in networking for about 12 years now. I started with my bachelor thesis in networking, did then a master's. In my master thesis, I worked for a small ISP, internet service provider company in the engineering department, where I was working on MPLS, figuring out a way to monitor MPLS, and moved then on to SME, small medium-sized company, like 3,500 people, and worked there on everything networking. Like everything networking from campus LAN, campus switching and routing, internet routing. I did wireless. I did a lot of data center networking, which I really liked, and moved up the stack and down. So I saw a lot of things in the IT infrastructure department, like how backup and recovery is done with TSM, VMware stuff, a little bit about Linux and Windows operations. After that, I moved to a very big company, like 280,000 people, one of the largest in Germany. And there I was in charge of networking for cloud environments, figuring out how we did connect all our on-premise systems with the cloud systems, how the architecture in the cloud should look like, to have a somewhat reasonable and fast connection between everything, stable solutions, stuff like that. So a lot of BGP, a lot of MPLS is there as well there. So this is my experience in networking. As I said, roughly 12 years. And I give you my thoughts on the networking space, if I would advise someone to move into it, if he's in the beginning of his career maybe, or maybe want to transition towards more of a networking focus. But also talk about if you're already networking, maybe should you stay in networking, or maybe switch it up, move to something else, and what this something else could be, also from a cloud as well as on-premise standpoint. So let's start with the upsides of networking, and there are plenty in my opinion. Again, one of my favorite fields in all of IT. What I like the most about networking is that it's super complex. I really like that there are so many moving parts, and to figure out how this all works, I had a lot of fun there. So for me, I'm somewhat drawn to complexity, to those little puzzles, and networking is definitely something there. You can really think a lot and deeply about how the things work together to get good solutions going. So if you like complexity and think really deep and want to understand how something works in detail, you're good in the networking department, because this is something you do there a lot. And with that, you also learn a lot, because everything is connected to the network. You know it if you have some experience. Networking is everywhere. It's the underlying fabric of everything. So with networking, you learn a lot about all the other systems as well, because they depend on it, they rely on it. I like that really much. So another thing from this complexity as well, I really liked all the algorithms and ways to think about distributed systems. So I like distributed systems. Networking is just a part of that. I like to think about the algorithms, and I think they're really cool. Like even this basic one, like a spanning tree algorithm, super basic, but if you think about it, what it's actually doing, I think it's pretty cool. How it works, what were the design criteria and ideas behind it. I always enjoyed those. Thinking about how, why they came to the conclusion, what is the problem they want to solve. I really enjoy this part of the networking stack, and there are so many different algorithms and different protocols. It's definitely something you can keeps you busy for a long time to really understand those and to work with them. It's also really cool if you go a little bit deeper and then you think about how those different algorithms will converge, like how fast will they tolerate a failure, build themselves up in their routing topology, and then work properly again after something goes offline. Just another layer of complexity where you can think about. One cool thing is if you understand networking, you understand a lot of other things as well. Networking are the basis for like firewalling, security devices of any kind, every kind. So networking is the basis there, but it has a good opportunity, or it has a good possibility to go into other directions as well, and quite deep there, and also give you a good head start when you transition to something else like security. Because a lot of security stuff is based around networking, because, if you shut the networking access to something down, and it's not reachable anymore, it's pretty secure by the design. If you can't reach it, it's quite secure. I mean, we saw in the last few years that there are exceptions to that, like Stuxnet did compromise stuff that was offline from a networking perspective, which was amazing. But the basic idea is if something is not connected, it's pretty secure. So we think about how we can block connections to make something secure. This is the whole idea about firewalling. Another thing that I think is cool about networking, is a bit of an arcane art. What I mean with that is there are not many people who actually understand on a deep level how packet rewriting or header rewriting actually works, how proxies work, how they handle and manipulate headers to get to a certain outcome. Again, a lot of complexity there. You can study and figure out how this actually works, and to get it to work is pretty cool. Somehow I like that. But it also means a little bit of job security, because there are not many people who know how this stuff works. This also, nutting, for example, on firewall level, is the same thing. Modern firewalls have so many dirty tricks. Most people are not aware and have a very hard time wrap their head around how this actually works. So, and if it breaks, you need someone who actually understands it. Otherwise, you have a hard time troubleshooting it. So, there is some kind of job security there because it's so difficult. But in general, I just love the little puzzles to get something working. Gave me a lot of satisfaction to think about a proper solution that might work, and then implementing it, and it actually works. I really like that. Because it's so complex, it is also satisfying to some extent, at least to me. What's not so fun is when it still breaks down. It's some edge case you haven't considered or haven't understood it in detail enough, and then it breaks down, or more breaks down than you thought, because some component had a failure, or a failure you haven't anticipated. And this stuff like that happens actually more often than you think, and there are crazy errors which I've seen in my years, where it's super hard to, basically impossible to figure that out in advance. So and then you see everything blow up, and you wonder how this error works. But networking is it's super complex. It's maybe hyper complex, which means you can't fully understand it at some point because it's so many moving parts, and it has super high impact. So if it breaks, stuff really breaks. It is very difficult to recover from, because networking is this underlying level. If it breaks, stuff goes down, which we see all the time. No, not all the time, but sometimes when those public cloud providers go down, it's probably network related stuff. Like Facebook went down because of DNS, in Azure had multiple outages, which usually are networking related. Which brings us to the second point of the video, the downsides of networking. And ultimately why I left it, at least why I distanced myself more from it. Because networking is such high impact, if you make an error, things go down. It leads to very conservative and very proven solutions. There's not much innovation and not so much experimentation as for you as a networking engineer. It's more like, do you know the best practices and can you get them to work? You don't come up with a crazy new design usually. I mean, maybe there are some lucky people at Hyperscaler which can actually do that, but for me it was get the proven solutions running and make them as stable and as simple and as easy as possible. This is basically what networking came down to, because it's that high impact. And this also obviously has impacts on the design. So the default network architecture, the perfect network architecture, in my opinion, is default settings on everything, because anything else, any deviation from the default is harder and harder and harder to troubleshoot. And you really want things as simple as possible, because then you have a chance to actually understand what it is doing, and somebody, which is hopefully not you, can troubleshoot it as well. I mean, you know the saying, things are twice as hard to troubleshoot than is to come up with it or to architect. So if you spend all your brain power in architecting a fancy solution, you're basically incapable of troubleshooting it. Especially if it's not even you, but some poor guy on an on-call shift who needs to troubleshoot it. Not going to happen. So things need to be super simple. So basically in my years, I hardly ever saw anything else other than OSPF area 0. And I mean, there are tons of cool things you can do with OSPF in the different zones, but nobody uses it. Why should you? Usually just works with OSPF and connect everything from other sides with BGP. You're done. It's way simpler. Don't even bother with going into details and being fancy. And this is the next point I wanted to make. For me, this became at some point boring, because you know all the stuff and you see all the bells and whistles and things you could tweak and tune and make better and make fancy, but you're either not allowed to touch it or you don't want to touch it, because it adds complexity that is not necessary, and makes everything harder to troubleshoot, and might even blow up in your face in some edge case you have never experienced or never heard of. I mean, at some point you figure out, okay, I have this book. It's quite big. And then I have this, which is also quite big. It's full of cool things, only about routing. And networking is so much bigger than just routing. And this is just not even the fancy stuff you can do on a network, on a data center network these days. And you hardly use anything of that. I studied those books and all the things in there, but you never use it. So it became frustrating for me. I don't like stuff like that. I like to use the knowledge I learn. So not a point for me to say, I think I'm done with networking. I mean, the next point is related to the big impact that networking has. Since the networking is underneath everything and is basically connected to everything that the app is experiencing, whenever something goes down, you as a networking guy get a call. I cannot tell you in how many troubleshooting sessions I was or got involved in that had nothing to do with the network. But networking is guilty till proven innocent, so therefore it is a lot of time that you spend troubleshooting something that is, might not even be your fault. On the other hand, I mean, you as a networking guy, especially if you have the firewalls as well, you have logs of everything and you can actually see what is going on. If you don't have good traceability on your application side as implemented, then networking logs might be the only thing that helps you at this point, because at least you have them. And I understand why network guys get involved in the troubleshooting. It's still annoying. And on the other hand, you learn a lot doing that. Another point that I really disliked at some point is when you try to become a little bit more advanced, and I constantly want to learn new things, then I started to wanted to automate more and more of my networking tasks about the daily doings, so to speak. But I can tell you, automating networking stuff is like nightmare. It is so bad. It is incredible. It's like the crappiest home automation you can ever think of. That's basically the level of what you deal with when you want to automate network routing and switching, stuff like that. And I mean, I worked with routers that cost more than a house. So to me, it's amazing that network automation and the level of APIs you have are that bad. It's mind-boggling. It's super annoying. Another point for me to say, don't want to do networking. On the other hand, hey, that's job security right there. The last thing I want to say, networking, it's just annoying because TCP/IP is just annoying. It's not a proper ISO/OSI 7-layer system, but they do it in 4 or 5. And it doesn't have a session handling or session layer. It makes everything very complicated. If you think about how load balancers work and what they have to do this very simple task and what can break there, it is completely unnecessary complexity, basically. If we would have a different underlying base protocol, stuff would be way easier. However, get this thing implemented, not going to happen. It's super difficult. The big cloud providers worked on this as well. Don't count on that. So, and if you think about why all this is, well, networking was designed in a time when compute resources were actually expensive. I mean, there was a time when RAM was measured in kilobytes. I mean, you can still measure it in that way, but today we can throw around with gigabytes. Nobody cares. So it is super conservative. One in how much data actually is put over the wire to manage the state. So it has an impact on speed. The less you have to transmit to calculate the topology of the network, the faster it will converge, it will build up. Also the amount of data they keep in their RAM or the TCAM to calculate where to route something. I mean, the whole protocols and everything was designed when RAM and compute was very scarce. All those complexities that are there, all those bells and whistles, were just basically there to cut down on the necessary hardware demands, which is something we don't need at all in this day and age. Compute resources are dirt cheap, so just throw them on it, which is also a reason why nobody uses those complex features anymore. But default just runs fine. The things don't converge any faster or any slower, because hardware is cheap, or at least it should be cheap. Somehow you still are amazed at how little horsepower is in such routers and switches for the price you pay, but this is another story. So at some point I moved into cloud networking, and there everything is a little bit different. I mean, cloud networking is super basic. they basically figured that out as well. You hardly have any configuration possible. Why? Because you don't need it. Resources are there. It's basically connectivity. I mean, super basic stuff. BGP is basically the only thing you can configure. And then you think about subnetting and maybe a little bit of routing with route tables, but yeah, super basic stuff. On the other side, this can be super annoying. To this day, and I mean it's 2024, Azure cannot route hub-spoke networking topology. It's all hub and spoke. On the other hand, AWS is great. You can do a lot of stuff there. Google is also good. However, I have limited experience with GCE. But what I saw, it worked all very well. I was very pleased with that. Maybe on a level of like AWS, a little less, but still super basic stuff. You're not allowed to go under the hood to configure something fancy. It just works, which is exactly what networking should be doing. All this complexity is completely useless because we have compute resources. At least the cloud providers do. So data center networking is way cooler. It's way faster on some point and different than the traditional larger routing and campus networking. There some cool innovations are actually happening. I really enjoyed data center networking, and I think if I would have to stay with networking, I would focus heavily on data center networking because there you have pretty cool new stuff to work with. Also, but again, super high impact. If something goes wrong, it really goes wrong. And for me, this was also funny because, those cloud environments, there's a reason why you don't have those features as well. They don't even automate them. I mean, they could offer you the possibility for some complexity, but they don't, because automating it is just, it's a waste. It's not useful. So, should you start with networking? Should you stick with it? Should you leave it? What's my opinion there? Well, I think if you like networking, stick with it. I mean, if you really enjoy it, if you are in a good position, if things for your job work out well, and I mean, a lot of networking jobs are actually pretty cool. It can be super chill. Then stick with it. I mean, networking is about deep thinking. There's a lot of time you spend just figuring out if I do this change, what will happen? What can go wrong? How do I react when it goes wrong? Stuff like that. So it's super in advance planning. If you like stuff like that, networking is great in my opinion. I really like that. And there's always new things to learn. Maybe not to implement, but to learn. And troubleshooting is also, most time it's fun. However, if I would advise you to really think about if you are a very conscientious person. If you're not conscientious, which means if you're not over prepared for any change you do, who could break something, at some point you will break things. I'm not super conscientious, and I broke things in networking in the data center. I mean, I could always fix it super quickly because I knew what I was doing, but still, stuff just broke in unexpected ways, which I then thought, I think if I had thought even more about it in the first place, I could have caught that. So keep that in mind. I mean, there is no fail-safe in networking. This is one thing that is super annoying. In software engineering, we have something I really like is test-driven development. You write your tests, and then you write your software, and it validates the tests. And you know while you're developing it, it should work pretty fine, pretty good, because my tests are passing. So I have a good feeling that the thing I'm building at the moment will run, and it will not blow up everything. Yeah, you don't have nothing like that in networking, which is super annoying. You implement it and you put it into production. Yeah, there's a small chance it does not work. So that's why, for someone like me, I'm better off doing actually software work or other things. Networking was always a little bit of uphill battle, but you learn discipline and a proper way of working as well, so it was good for me. Another cool thing, is that you learn more and more and more about the whole networking. Another thing is that you learn more and more and more about all of the IT landscape. If you're in networking, you have a very good possibility to work up the stack and go into virtual machine administration, or maybe the backup stuff, this storage networks, stuff like that. And you're usually involved in all kinds of things that are happening around the data center or the campus. So I like that as well, to be involved and to know what's going on, and working with the different teams there to make something, to make big changes happening. Should you start a networking career? Should you consider it? Again, if you're conscientious and you really like to figure out stuff and learn new stuff, then I think yes, it's a great thing to learn. Even the basics will help you much in the future. If you want to learn networking, always remember it. For me, this was a game changer, to realize what networking is basically distributed state management. All that networking tries to solve is the issue that all of the routers and switches, like the connection pieces, know where to put the packets to in the most efficient way. That's all it is. And if you think about that, okay, I want to update, I want to tell the network where it should put packets, and this is how and protocols are just a way to configure that behavior, then it really clicked for me, and it made it so much easier than focusing on the stupid iOS commands that made something happening. So you will learn also a lot of basics for other things, like how do all high availability stuff basically demands networking configurations as well. Scaling of any kind is somewhat networking related. Distribution of compute, it's always networking is involved there. So even basics in networking will help you tremendously if you understand it. And so it's a good field to have at least some experience in. As well as for all the security stuff, a lot of firewalling and security vulnerabilities all come down to network related stuff, or stuff that you as a networking guy know at least how they work. So it's a cool thing. So so what I would advise someone who is a networking guy, has a basic understanding there, but wants to leave the field, move in something else, I would advise them to either go into the security realm. It's super close to networking. You understand the basics, all the vocabulary, and can just transition there. Maybe even one step further is to learn coding. And from there, I would just say, okay, learn Python, Rust, Go, whatever. And try learn it with little projects for your networking that you're doing at the moment. Like I automated the config management for my switches and routers. So the configuration was assembled automatically once I put in the parameters, or some parameters. The rest it could look up, and then I learned practical coding experience in my day job. Don't try to automate the networking pieces or the running networking stuff. Maybe automate your troubleshooting efforts that you have to do, like how to gather the usual commands to figure out if routing broke or something else, or gather some logs. You can all automate those. And then you can move into security with your programming as well as networking knowledge. You can say, okay, now I want to move in a cloud environment, be a cloud architect there, because the whole idea or the whole networking mindset about making stuff super simple and how distributed systems work, those all apply very well. So it's a good basis for everything. Networking is always a good basis for everything IT. And at that point, if you understand the coding more and more, you can move to the DevOps side of things, which I did. Like in everything cloud related, DevOps is really near to networking, as well to a little bit of software engineering. There you can figure out like CI/CD pipelines and the agents that build and run things. So if you have a little bit more experience outside of the networking, this prepares you really well for a DevOps career, I think. So this is definitely something you could just work on and work towards, from networking towards DevOps. And another thing is just to go all in for super broad and be like a cloud architect. So with a networking background, this helps you to understand how and where to place workloads, but there's a lot to learn there as well. However, this distributed thinking, thinking in how do I make solutions that are as simple as possible, all of those are really valuable when you are working in bigger cloud projects. And I think there as well, the networking skill set and mindset helps you quite a bit. Nevertheless, I would be interested in what you think about networking at this moment, and maybe if my experiences are already overhauled, maybe networking automation became better in the last few years when I wasn't really active in this space anymore, but I doubt it. So yeah, would be interesting for me to get your insight there in the comments. And with that, goodbye. Thanks for watching.